All right, so vicarious trauma in teachers. What can we do to avoid and help vicarious trauma in teachers? How common is it? What's the big deal about it? Can you avoid it, and what is it? Let's find out the answers. Before we do, we're going to talk about why I chose this topic. All right, so my topic I chose for this project was over vicarious trauma, especially in teachers. My focus is in teachers because I know that as a future teacher, I didn't really consider the effects that my students' trauma might have on me, and I just feel like learning ways to cope with it, learning more about it, and knowing how this can happen, just having a better idea of what it is and how to deal with it is very important, especially for me because I'm very interested in helping people. Well, obviously, my future students. And I know that it might affect me in my future because that's my specialty is for caring for others, and I'll get into it later more in depth. But I read in one of my articles that caring about your students is actually what can really hurt you in the sense of vicarious trauma, and that's why I chose to do my project over this because I think it's an important topic that we should definitely cover, and I'm very passionate about learning about it because I know that it's going to be something I may deal with in the future, and learning about how to deal with it will be very helpful for me and hopefully others because possibly I'll be sharing this, especially since we're posting on YouTube. But that is my topic, and let's get into it. So what is vicarious trauma in teaching? Trauma teachers have from learning about trauma their students experience. So it's like a secondary trauma, and it focuses on teachers who experience this from their student situations. So it's by learning your student situations, you experience trauma from it because it's you start to feel bad for them and want to help them, but there's nothing really there are things you can do, but in some situations there may not be. So that is why we call it vicarious trauma, because teachers experiencing the trauma secondary from their students. So the symptoms of vicarious trauma are very similar to PTSD, as you can see: withdrawal from family and friends, constant worry about the student, their situation, their well-being and health, anger, struggle to focus, and restlessness, or inconsistent eating. That could be eating more often than normal or maybe hardly eating. These are just a couple of ways you might be able to recognize it if you didn't know. Now, the relevance of vicarious trauma is that many children experience more than one traumatic event in their life. Children experiencing traumatic events can just play a role in the amount of traumatic events that teachers hear about and just experience as secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. And that same source had cost of caring on their site, and I thought that was very important to talk about because it is the cost of caring you may experience vicarious trauma. And I also found that this study had 200 staff out of 6 schools, which just sounds like a lot of teachers, for 6 schools. So that just tells you there's a lot of people that are affected. And another thing I found was that there are, a good amount of numbers of helping professionals that develop this trauma. I found this from another site, and that just tells you that there are a lot of people that are affected by these traumas that students are experiencing. I want to contribute to this vicarious trauma in ways to help. I would want to start safe rooms where teachers could meditate with soothing massage chairs, nice smells, ways to relax, just being comfortable in this room. It could be It could be like a teacher's lounge, anything, just something converted to a relaxing space that's quiet for teachers to just unwind and kind of take off all of the things that they're experiencing in there and leave in there so they can go back to their classroom and regather themselves. It would be cool to create a program that could be implemented into schools to form this. That's just one way I was thinking of trying to implement it into schools. So let's talk about the path it would take. The path that I would take would be that I would just make sure that I would have good proof that this is productive and works, and I would use some of the sites that I have here to show that these are the ways to help vicarious trauma. And I would also want to implement in those safe rooms, a part of it would be a counselor. I meant to mention that, but just having some sort of counseling support for the teachers after school, before school, easier hours for them that wouldn't have to be outside of school. And the school board approval to fund the program to implement safe rooms for teachers, that would be something I would have to accomplish. And I think it would be easy to do with the evidence I have and the stats to show what the amount of people that are affected by this and what it does to have the support for teachers. And then I think a barrier maybe would be the adequate space in schools, but I've come up with a way to fix that. So a barrier we may face, like I said, could be finding the room in schools to support and implement a safe room for teachers, or maybe a teacher lounge could be converted to work around this problem, which I think would be really a good accommodation for teachers and a good way to make it work with what they have, because it just would be hard to have a school build a new room, but finding a room maybe that just isn't really used, or that would just be a good way to take advantage of an empty room for helping the school, just be there for their teachers even more. So as I mentioned, finding the room in schools to implement a safe room for teachers, and many schools have more than one teacher's lounge, and I know that my high school had like at least 3, and you could turn one into a safe room and have 2 teacher's lounges, and I think that it's important to have this room specifically outside of the teacher's lounge, because it's going to be a quiet space. It's going to be where you can experience and feel the things that you are without being interrupted by other people, or just having that specific space where it's meant for winding down and just taking your feelings and using meditation to cope with what you're hearing and learning about from your students. And this is my sources slide.